see you guys in the dark.
Okay, so this all happened about 3 years ago or so. I was around 17. I'm not going to dramatize anything, but let me go ahead and say that I think, personally, that this is a pretty bizarre story. There are some details about my actual relationship I'm going to leave out. I kind of want to answer this story / question, but I don't think I'll ever get one. I've been wanting to get some outside opinions on it, aside from my friends and family too, though, so here it goes. My ex Jane and I lived about an hour away from each other. We met at a park out of state and ended up living kind of close. We hit it off and dated a month after we met. Our entire relationship lasted a year, and she was my first girlfriend ever. From the very beginning of the relationship, she would discuss her best friend named Patrick. He was in his late 20s. She, as a reminder, was 17 and worked in a bookstore. He lived in her town, and she had known him since she was 13. From very early on, I thought the stories she would tell about him were kind of outlandish. She would talk about watching him get into bar fights with a guy that went by Hammer, how once they pretended to rob a gas station, but left money behind on the counter, and had to jump off a roof to escape security, in which Patrick broke his ankle. Another time, Patrick got a brand new Mustang that they wanted to crash into a lake, so they jumped out at the last second. She told me that one towards the end of our relationship, at which point I was completely skeptical of everything she said. You get the idea. The stories she told seemed clearly exaggerated or downright fake. Part of me thought she was trying to impress me for whatever reason. Here are some other important facts I don't exactly know where to put, so I'll lay them out there. Jane was an artist. She drew all the time in her journal. She rarely drew people as they actually were. She drew people as monsters or animals. For example, she always drew me as a giraffe. She was pretty good at it. Patrick's last name, according to her, was pronounced and spelled a certain way. Willington. Patrick Willington. Patrick's dad owned a successful company out of the state that Patrick would inherit. Jane had a much older brother who was in his late 20s as well, that had joined the military and moved to Korea. She only saw him every few years or so. Okay, now continuing. Jane would tell me that Patrick was very protective of her. She would tell me about him, and he would always be unsure of what he thought. She said he wanted to beat me up sometimes, and that he'd hurt me if I hurt her. If she told him about something silly I did, he'd think I was an idiot and call me stupid. He also thought I was gay. This is all, of course, second-hand information. Never once in the entire relationship do I think I spoke to him. I'd also like to remind everyone that this was my first relationship. I was very insecure, very confused, and there was more going on in it that complicated some things. I did not have the best relationship. The thing is, I really didn't have any reason not to believe her, you know. She had no reason to lie about any of this, but I was still very skeptical. Sometimes Jane would go to Patrick's house really late at night. She said she'd sleep on his couch and that he would literally throw her out of the house in the morning. Sometimes she said she had to sneak out of her house to go to his. He lived within walking distance, apparently. One time, later in the relationship, Patrick invited her on an out-of-state trip back to his hometown. They were going to stay in a mountain cabin for a week. I was not happy about that. I was more upset when she said she wouldn't tell her parents and that they'd leave on a bus in the morning. Now, at this point in the relationship, I was very unsure of what was going on with this Patrick person. But Jane said that if I told her parents about the trip, that she wouldn't be able to go, and that Patrick would hate me, and she'd be pissed. It was important to her because Patrick apparently would be forced to move away soon to work at his dad's company. And she said she'd never see him again, so she needed to go. Well, when the day came for her to leave, Patrick never showed up to get her or whatever. She was very upset, even though he'd be back in town one more time. On another tidbit, Jane's parents never once mentioned Patrick ever. She never brought him up around them either. The only time she mentioned Patrick to anyone else was to my dad once, after we broke up. She told my dad one of the outlandish stories I mentioned. My dad was flabbergasted. Basically, I had told him about all of this, but hearing it in person was crazy. Patrick was to have a birthday party once. I was invited. It was going to be at his house, starting at midnight. I said I couldn't go do that, but that I'd get him a present instead. I got him a toolkit. She said he'd like that, and I gave it to her for him. She said she brought it, and that he did in fact like it. She said the party lasted until about 6 a.m. Patrick sent me a text from her phone once, when she was with him. It was standard behavior for him. He said I was a pansy or something, and that he'd beat me up. That was early on. Now, here is where I think things were very interesting. Jane lived nearby an elementary school. She walked with me there, and said his house was close to it. So she leads me to the back of the school, where there is woodland. She brings me to the edge of the woods, and has me look in. I see this very old, wooden tin house sort of structure. It has broken windows. It's filthy. It's falling apart. The path to it is covered by bushes and trees. She said that that was his house. Oh, and at this point, he had moved to work at the company out of state. I asked her if she was joking. She said no, that he wasn't a very tidy person, even when he lived there. I thought briefly that maybe the house was just weird looking on the outside, but actually good on the inside. But there's no way that it was. It was abandoned. Anyways, that same day, she asked if I wanted to go inside. It was hot, getting dark, no one knew exactly where we were, and I didn't want to get cut up by bushes or go in the sketchy house. So I said maybe another time. She insisted, saying that Patrick wanted us to check on things, but eventually she gave up. This was very close to the end of our relationship. I asked her a few more questions, like, "You went through those bushes and stuff every time you went to go see him?" She said yes, but they had overgrown since he left. I also asked how he drove out of his house, how anyone visited him otherwise, how he got mail. She eventually realized that maybe I didn't exactly believe her, and she got mad. I said I was sorry, and that it was just different to me. She insisted that it was true. I let it go. Well, we ended up breaking up shortly after, but I had a hard time coping with the breakup, and ended up speaking with her again later. She was on a bus with her class to go to some trip. Well, I lost connection with her, and called back. A young man answered. I asked who it was. He said it was Patrick Willingson, not Willington. So I opened up with a question about his last name, and also why he had her phone. He said that was always his last name. He said he was on his office phone. I kept asking him questions about himself that only the real Patrick would know. I heard noises in the background. He would pause a minute before answering. I think she just handed the phone to a classmate and told him what to say. Frankly, that's the only real answer to that one. Well, he hung up, and I called her back. Jane answered and said that Patrick told her I somehow got connected to his phone, since he was in her recent contacts or something. Clearly BS, but I played along with it, and left it at that. Oh, and he wanted to beat me up, of course, badly for breaking her heart. Well, I kept speaking to her for a week or two, and we both finally got closure about the relationship. But as I was recounting this experience with a friend, I realized something. Probably just a creepy coincidence, but I had said Jane was an artist, and that she always drew people as other things. Well, I saw many drawings of Patrick. She always said he wore this dark coat and ripped pants or something. She, as usual, didn't draw him as a human. She drew him as a skeleton. Really creeped me out for whatever. I may be forgetting some other weird things that happened, but that's the main stuff. Now, to tie it all together, here are some stuff that I have done about it since. I tried using Google Earth to look at his house, since I remember exactly where she showed me. The trees are too thick to see in, and there is construction nearby, so it may not even be there anymore. I have not gone back in person since it is too far away, and also close to her house. I have Googled and researched it countless times, and anything I could remember. No usual results. She used to mention him on social media sometimes. A friend of mine, who had trouble grasping all of this, found her profile and saw him mentioned. Recently, too. I have a few theories about this. Patrick was sort of an imaginary friend character that she made up to fill a place of her much older brother who moved away, and she didn't see very often. Second, it was all BS that she made up for whatever reason, to impress me sometimes, to coerce me to other things. 3. It was part of a much greater disorder problem. 4. Patrick didn't exist in some way, shape, or form, but she highly, highly exaggerated him and rarely saw him, so she told me whatever she wanted about him. It may not be as creepy to all of you since you're on the outside of my social circle, but like I said, that's why I'm posting. But to me personally, I am bothered by this. Jane had a tendency to be very violent and say threatening things to me. Why did she make it all up? Why did she show me the house and say that it was his? What was in the house? Regardless if anyone lived there, did she ever actually go in like she said she did? Did she sleep there sometimes, or visit late at night like she said? If so, what in the world was she doing? Did someone really somehow live there? Why did she draw him as a skeleton? Why did she have strong feelings about me? Why did she change his last name? Why did she do the weird things with the phone and classmate? How many of her other loved ones know about this? What would have happened if I went in that house? Etc. Some of this is probably heightened by my anxiety, but I do think it's a weird story. I plan on using it for a fictional story one day, and of course, changing some stuff for it. But anyways, thank you all for listening. There have been suggestions to go back to the house with friends and check it out. I mentioned in a comment that has been considered before, but there are some problems. The house was actually 2 stories high, so I'm not sure if it's stable enough. It may also not be there if the construction I saw on the Google map continued. And of course, it's close to her house and an elementary school. So lots of potential for it to go badly, even with friends. If I ever go back, I will take pictures and update everything. As for contacting her, her friends, her family to learn more, while I understand the desire for answers, I simply won't do that. Everyone's moved on, and hopefully happy and better off now. So no need to start potential trouble. I for sure wish I had a complete explanation. But for now, we just have to guess and theorize, I suppose. We've got some pretty solid answers, and some pretty wild ideas.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.